to highlight trends in national and international collective memory regarding the rescue of the Danish Jews. It is probably well known to all of you that in the course of just a few weeks in the autumn of 1943, 95% of the Danish Jews were rescued to safety in neighboring Sweden, thanks to the altruistic help and assistance of their fellow Danes. By the way, it's an event that Grossman, whom we heard about yesterday, referred to as Little Dunkirk. The event is rightfully world famous, perhaps the only really world famous event in modern Danish history. However, both home and abroad, the memory of the event has been clouded by a range of myths and silences. And the chasm between memory and research, or history if you prefer, is getting deeper. My task is to question these distortions and to offer new answers. In this paper, I will identify the differences between national and international collective memory and claim that the national memory in Denmark is assimilating to an international, even global memory, and in this process, vital insights might be lost, yet what might be termed a glocalization of the national memory might offer new acknowledgement if the pitfalls of idealized interpretation is avoided. Challenging the myths is not an academic exercise. A more realistic perception of the rescue has much to offer. Not only does it enhance the understanding of the preconditions of rescue and survival during the Holocaust, but it also allows acknowledgement of personal memories that have been disregarded and neglected by the collective memory culture. But let me start with the humorous angle, if I can get the first slide. I hope you can see it. This is quite a point. Can you all see it? I'll translate it, obviously. This cartoon was printed in the popular cartoon network called Svikmøllen. It's also an almost untranslatable term meaning something like vicious circles. It was printed in the first free edition in 1945. You can see there is a noble gentleman approaching the ticket office at the ferry service between Copenhagen and the Swedish city of Malmö, on the other side of the Øresund, the narrow strait between Denmark and Sweden. And the dialect says, "What is the price for a ticket to Sweden?" And the ticket office man answers, 5 kroner and 60 euro. "That's cheap," the man replies. "Last time I paid 3,000 kroner." It has never been a taboo in Denmark that the Jews paid a considerable amount of money for their illegal transport to Sweden. The amount mentioned, 3,000 kroner, is at the top end of the average price of 1,000 kroner per person. It's about $150 or 130 euros. However, this is at a time when the average hourly wage for an industrial worker is about 2 kroners. To get an idea of the value in present-day money, multiply the amount by 20. Yet the question of the money is extremely sensitive. National debate on the issue is apologetic or plays down the consequences. Overall, the payment is rationalized as a life insurance for the fishermen who risk their lives, their safety, and their livelihood in case of arrest, destruction, or confiscation of the boat. However, for more than 2 decades has gone by since meticulous Danish research has established that the fishermen did not risk their lives to help Jews. Neither did they risk deportation to German concentration camps. Rescuers caught by the Gestapo were handed over to Danish courts to be charged with assisting illegal migration. The maximum penalty was 3 months imprisonment on the relatively lenient condition in a Danish prison. Most of the cases, however, never came to court, or court officials let the rescuers slip away through the back door. Thus, the rescuers faced only very limited sanctions. But let me take you further into the events of the autumn of 1943. The raid against the Danish Jews was implemented on the evening of October 1st, when most Jews were considered to be in their homes celebrating the Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. The raid was efficient, well-planned, and carefully executed, parallels to raids all over Europe. But the order stipulated that it had to be concluded in just 3 hours. Fortunately, most Jewish families had already left their homes. Several Germans had leaked the crucial information of the time and date of the raid, and the warning spread like wildfire. The element of surprise was almost completely absent. Only 202 of the more than 7,000 Jews of Copenhagen were arrested on that night. and there were no roundouts of Jews after the central raid on October 1st. The 1,500 police soldiers available for the raid was never used to search for Jews or for patrolling the Danish coast. The persecution of the Jews after the raid was now left to a small group of Gestapo men, who by no means had the resources to control a coastline that is more than 100 kilometers long. Furthermore, the Germans had taken steps to avert Jews being caught at sea. There were no German police surveillance over the strait between Denmark and Sweden in October 1943. German patrol boats performed only naval duties. All surveillance boats available were allocated for minesweeping. German police did not seize any of the 600 to 700 illegal transport carrying Jewish refugees at sea. Jews were often caught by coincidence, usually at harbors crowded with people. Let us zoom in on Torbæk, a small fishing hamlet on the north of Copenhagen. And if I can get the next slide, there's a map, which is convenient for those of you that are not familiar with Danish geography. In Torbæk, two Gestapo agents who were tipped off arrived at the port just as a fishing boat with refugees were leaving the quay. 13 people were arrested that night. 5 were later deported to the ghetto of Theresienstadt. Witnesses at the war crime trials in Denmark after the war, however, reported that there were quite a lot of people at the harbour, among them several Danish police officers who assisted the rescue. Danish law during the occupation prohibited leisure boating and unauthorized traffic in the harbours. A crowd of 13, maybe 40 people in the middle of the night during a curfew can hardly be considered discreet. The situation was all too obvious and activated an informer who alarmed the Gestapo. The combination of the fact that Jews paid a large sums for the rescue and the limited risk of helping leads us to the unpleasant conclusion that the Danish Jews were abused, that the fishermen took advantage of the desperate emergency of the Jews. But is that just a cynic rationalization made years after the events in a safe and cozy distance? Obviously, it is essential to consider the difference between assessments made today and the perception of the people involved at the time, who did not perceive, or at least only partly perceived, the real risk of their actions. Yet it is a vital conclusion that money was a precondition for the success of the rescue. Money secured that there were enough fishermen willing to sail. The supply made it possible to transport almost 8,000 people out of Denmark in just a few weeks, minimizing the risk of exposure and arrest in hiding. When honoring the subjective fears of the rescuers and the fishermen fearing for their lives, it is still inevitable to confront the fact that the prices were subjected to the mechanism of supply and demand, regardless of the need for insurance for the material risk taken by the fishermen or security for the families of the rescuers in case of arrest. As the demand faded in November 1943, when the transport of Jews was over, the average price for the crossing dropped to 100 kroner, 10% of the October price. To this might be added that the rescuers operating on land, on the Danish coast, finding secure hiding places, housing and assisting refugees on their way to the coast, guiding the refugees to the harbours and beaches, collecting money, clothes and food supplies, were all assisting illegal migration and faced the same sanctions as the fishermen, and they did not receive payment at all. For the fishermen, desire to profit from the situation was intertwined with humanitarian motives. Moreover, it is a fact that several fishermen made a living and a fortune on the rescue. This complicates the symbolic value of the celebrated icon of the rescue, the fishing boat. And if I get the next slide, I got some examples from Israel and the United States. As you can see, it's quite a popular item, especially in American Holocaust museums. It obviously clashes with the Yad Vashem definition of the righteous, who should not receive any payment or reward for helping or assisting Jews. But let me return to the fishing hamlet of Torbæk mentioned earlier, the overcrowded harbour where 13 Jews were arrested on a night in October 1943. It is one of the best documented events during the rescue operation, because a young man was shot and killed by the Gestapo when he was assisting a group of Jews into a boat. Just as the boat was leaving the harbor, the Gestapo arrived and fired what they claimed was a warning shot. However, a young man was hit and died immediately. One of the Gestapo men was a Dane who was tried with murder after the war. And if I get the next slide, you can see a picture of the forensic department of the Copenhagen police who's conducting crime scene investigations in 1943 in Torvik Harbor. And the next slide. Ido. Sorry. Tempo. Now we got this one. This handsome young man. Claus Heilesen was 18 years old and an engineer student and has been honored for his deed on several memorials and is frequently mentioned in the literature on the rescue as an example of the bravery of the rescuers and the brutal risk they faced. This is the young man that was killed in Torvik in the mentioned event. However, nobody paid attention to the fact that his mother was Jewish. Hence, according to the Holocaust, he was a Jew, and according to the Nazi, a Muslim. And he was fleeing to Sweden himself. He did arrange and organize the illegal transport, but he too was on his way into the boat off to Sweden. Claus Heilesen's deed was outstanding, but not his deeds. Personal memories and oral history with Danish Jewish survivors challenges the notions of the Jews as passive victims that needed saving. Rather than passive objects of persecution and rescue, they were active subjects who tried their best to secure their possessions and belongings, who managed to obtain cash needed for the flight with short time in their hands, who organized transport not only for the nearest family, but also for relatives and friends. When the flight started in late September 1943, the earliest transport often were conducted in small rowing boats. These navigations were extremely dangerous, not because of the risk of exposure, but because the rowing boats that were sold to the Jews were in very poor conditions. Many of the known drowning accidents happened in the beginning in these small boats. And there's an example, if I can get the next slide. This is a photograph taken in Sweden just after the safe arrival of these 4 Jewish siblings. Also in the boat was their aunt and a fisherman. As you can see, one of the oars broke. Fortunately, it was close to the Swedish coast. At least 20 Jewish refugees drowned on their way to Sweden. Transported by fishing vessels made it possible for more refugees more safely to make the crossing. The broken oar, by the way, is on display at the Museum of the Danish Resistance, or at least it has been until recently, because a fire has devastated the museum, but a new museum is currently under construction, and I hope that the oar will be on display at this one as well. Moreover, a minimum of 150 Jewish children, 20% of the total number of children from newborn to 5 years of age affected by Nazi persecution, never made it to Sweden. Instead, they were placed with foster families or children's homes when their parents fled. Small children were considered a security hazard. Some rescue organizations refused to accept small children, and rumors circulated that children who could not keep quiet would be choked. Most children stayed with their foster family until their liberation for another 22 months. They are the hidden children of Denmark. In the next one, you can see an example of one of these hidden children, because these are charming photos of the little boy Lene, who was only 4 weeks old when his mother had to leave him in Denmark when she fled the Nazi persecution. This photo album was the only thing Lene had to remind him of his foster parents. He and his family lost contact with the couple, who obviously cared for the little boy as if he was their own. In none of the cases I have uncovered, foster family received payment for their deeds, and the children were well cared for and loved. The cases display a compassion and an altruism that validates the solidarity of the Danes towards the Jews. But they were placed there by their parents, paralyzed by fear, as a conscious choice to save the child. But the stories were repressed by the families and forgotten by the public. So why has this perspective of the victims been downplayed in historiography as well as in collective memory? In Denmark, as well as in the rest of Europe, the celebration of the resistance movement and the victims of political persecution often overshadowed the persecution of the Jews. However, due to the rescue, the persecution of the Danish Jews has always been an integrated part of the commemoration of the resistance. But the collective memory did not leave much room for mourning the death or acknowledging the racist and anti-Semitic motives behind the persecution. Focus has been on the rescuers instead of the victims. When the past was transformed into a collective memory, a narrative with a fixed set of stereotypes of the victims, the perpetrators, and the rescuers were formed. The interest in such a narrative in Danish society, as well as in the Jewish community, were convergent. While the Jewish community was overwhelmed by gratitude, the deeds of the ordinary Danes washed away the shame of defeat and collaboration. It is a paradox and a case of historical irony that it was precisely the utterly unheroic collaboration between the Danish government and the Germans that diverted German persecution of the Jews throughout most of the occupation. And it helped them escape when the German police finally struck. Denmark capitulated after just hours of fighting in 1940 and tried hard to comply with German demands afterwards. Yet this policy of cooperation, as it has been coined, allowed for mutual concessions, as the Danish government refused to allow any special measures regarding the Jews. On this point, they were in consonance with the vast majority of the Danish population. The Germans in Denmark realized that any further actions against the Jews would make it impossible to wait for a mutual understanding between the two nations. The Germans did not have freedom of action when it came to the Jews, and they complied because of the benefits of cooperation. Nazi ideology could be bended for practical results. After the war, neither pragmatic diplomacy nor Jewish defiance was instrumental for a nation defeated and liberated by foreign forces. In addition, Denmark desperately needed any positive PR that could appease Allied suspicion of the true motives of the Danes. The first historian to systematically investigate the events, it is noteworthy that he was an Israeli and not a Danish historian, namely Lene, emphasized that a key factor in explaining why the Jews in Denmark was rescued from German persecution was the fact that the Danes possessed, and I quote, a special character with its high ethical standard and its love of freedom and democracy. Yahil's early interpretation established the Danish case as an example of the political achievements of courageous, active resistance to Nazi persecution, and it was adopted by most Danish and international scholars and became the core of the master narrative about the Danish rescues, acknowledged worldwide as a rare shining light in the darkness of the European Holocaust. Yet the conclusion that the cooperation policy was paramount to Jewish survival in Denmark reorganizes the roles of perpetrators, bystanders, and rescuers, and it points to the crucial importance of the military situation and the occupation regime. It also points to the special character of the occupation regime in Denmark. Most comparative research has difficulties in placing Denmark in categories or types of occupation regimes due to the extraordinary nature of the peaceful occupation and cooperation policy. Denmark was a Sonderfall. Would such a negotiation result have been possible elsewhere at all? The protection of the Jewish community in Denmark was one of the most conspicuous achievements of the cooperation policy. However, the protection of human life came with the price of economic collaboration with Germany and support to the German war industry, and with political collaboration on combating communism, including assistance to the rest of Danish citizens. We may have found the answers as to how rescue was possible in Denmark, but we also have to pose new questions. How did the Jews manage to escape? What was their active contribution to their own survival? And what was the impact of Jewish self-help during the Holocaust? In focusing on their sacrifices and loss, new light is cast on an event that was formerly thought to be one of the best documented events of Danish history. The assimilation between national and international memory, which is, in my opinion, first and foremost an Americanization of the national memory, might potentially entail that the Jews of Denmark is acknowledged as a part of the European and Jewish ordeal of the Holocaust, and facilitate a new and long overdue focus on the victims and survivors. The perspective of the victim also provides us with new potential as it enables identification and understanding to a greater extent than do the dim visions of heroic freedom fighters. So we can indeed preserve the power of identification and education in one of the world's most cherished stories. Thank you for your attention.